Thanks very much for coming out. I have one groupie who saw me at the high school a couple of years ago, so I think that that's wonderful. And not that I was banished, but I think when the new college coordinator came in, they wanted to go more on the community college route. And I think what you're going to be seeing here tonight will give you far more information than they could give. So at least I'm hopeful anyway. So we'll go as far as we can. But that's me, Dr. Kevin Bukatman. That's how you spell my last name. And call me Kevin, it's a lot easier. And I'm very happy to be here. And I don't have to yell or scream or have a microphone, so it all works. That you've silenced your cell phones is fine. If you have a question during the presentation, because we're an intimate group, please raise your hand and I'll answer it as we go along instead of waiting till the end. So I think that'll work fine. So this is my company. I've been doing this for 11 years, and my mission statement is that everyone is entitled to financial aid. And it's not dependent on how much you earn or how smart your kid is, but there is financial aid available for almost everybody. And so I'm going to give you a lot of good clues as to where that is this evening. So we're going to begin. Most of the time when high school seniors come in, that's pretty much what they should be asking. How much are they going to be paying and how long for the rest of their lives? Because as you remember, when you went to college and university, if you did go, it was a lot less expensive, wasn't it? And so it has exploded in terms of the amount of money that is now required for students to attend. So the first question that people ask is, what is financial aid? How does it work? And it's a system designed to determine and meet a student's demonstrated need, which are all words that basically means is if you need-based financial aid, and you can prove it through the financial aid forms that you complete, you will be receiving need-based financial aid. It's interesting because we as parents don't have a financial interest in whether our children go to college or not. Now, for example, when was the last time that you thought, you know what, when my kid goes to college, they'll get rich and they're going to give me all the money back that I spent on them when they grew up. No, and did anybody sign? And I'm a notary, so in case you haven't, there's a nice little thing you could put down that says, for this gentleman here, he could write, I promise to take care of mom and dad in their old age. And then they sign it, I can notarize it. But how many of you have that document in your safe? No, didn't think so. But it's interesting because financial aid is a pure expense. But there is one entity that does really care whether your child goes to college or not, and that's our good old federal government. And here's why. Very simple. Students who go to college are supposed to earn more than students that have a high school diploma. We can accept that pretty much. Well, if they make more money, what are they going to pay more in? Taxes. So, the federal government says, we'll lend you as much money as you need for your child to attend college. Why? Because we know that once he or she graduates, we're going to be into you like nothing at all for the next 40, 50 years. They're going to be paying property taxes, real estate taxes, income taxes. So they're very, very interested in having all students attend and go to college. Now there are two categories of financial aid, just to let you know. The merit side has nothing to do with income or assets or anything like that. It's dependent on how well your student does in school with a GPA and how well they do on SATs and ACTs and things like that. So they're awarded by the school based on those results. Some schools award scholarships based on need only, which is sort of a misnomer. My brother is a professor at Stanford University, great university out there on the West Coast, and they only give scholarships to need-based students. And it's sort of a dichotomy only because a scholarship is supposed to be based on merit, not based on need, and yet a lot of these more expensive schools are only going to award scholarships based on need. And scholarships are usually awarded for 4 years. So your typical letter will be something like, congratulations, Johnny, welcome to Penn State University, and we're pleased to offer you a $40,000 scholarship payable $10,000 a year. Now, those of you familiar with Penn State know that I just lied because Penn State doesn't give any money. But Arcadia might, and other private schools will definitely. So there are schools like that. On the other hand, you have need-based, which are grants, and that can be through the federal government, state government, and also the school. And there are loans, which students can always qualify for, whether it's through the federal government or private sources like banks. And these are rewarded and reviewed on an annual basis. So unlike scholarships that are awarded for 4 years, as long as the student keeps matriculating and keeping their GPA up, these are renewed annually because when you file your financial aid forms, they're going to review and see what your income and assets are every single year. Since 1978, the cost of college tuition has increased, and that is not a misprint, 1,285%. Bigger than anything else you can think of, including medical, health, things like that. And the dirty little secret that no one wants you to know about is that the 4-year graduation rate at American universities, United States universities, is only 58%. That's for 4 years. Now here's why. If you went to college back in my day, which was centuries ago, but when you take a look back, when we went to college, it was, we knew what we wanted to go, you know, what degree we wanted. We went for 4 years, we graduated, we were out in the workforce, that was it. But nowadays, students are changing their majors 2 or 3 times. And colleges and universities, they're not dumb. They take a look and they say, oh, you want to change your major? Not a problem, here, sign here. And then they'll review the transcript. Now, if you change from math to English, all the math courses that you took, well, that's not going to be too germane or relevant for English. So the universities say, well, we'll transfer some of these credits, but we're not going to transfer other credits. And what does that do? That adds now another semester or another year, which means you're paying the college more and more money because your student changed. Now, I'm not saying you have to force your student to stay in their degree program, because as you know, in the workforce, people change their jobs very often as well. So it's just one of those things that does happen. So again, 25% of college students are going to change their majors at least twice while they're in school, and that's why you have to plan for more than 4 years of college. By the way, what makes me the expert isn't that I've been doing this for 11 years. I have a daughter, and she's 26 years old, and she graduated in 4 years, okay, at the end of 2013, and she's out in the workforce and doing nice things in the field that she studied for. So I'll give you a benediction at the end, and I hope that happens for all of you as well. So the landscape of higher education has changed, and here's why. All of you were around in about 2007, 2008, okay? And one day you opened up your retirement account statements, or you went online if you were lucky enough to have a computer, and well, you began crying. And the reason why you were is because 37% loss in the market meant 37% loss in your 401k or your IRA. Well, that affected all these schools as well, because they were the endowments. So the endowments went way down, and so that forced schools now to become less need blind and to award smaller amounts of money. And so all of this just cuts into everything else. And I can pretty much guarantee after 9 years, many of you are just now returning to that pre-2008 amount in your retirement accounts. And the same thing is happening for all these colleges and universities that did that as well. But take a look what happened. In 1989, only 17% of 20-year-olds had student debt. Now look what the number is last year, 42%. So it's almost tripled in that length of time because of these market losses and fluctuations. What does that mean? That means that fewer students are applying to the private schools, which are the more expensive schools, which are now almost grabbing almost everybody to get them to apply at least to these schools and universities. But now all these public universities, their applications skyrocketed and made it a lot harder to get into these schools. For example, take a look at UDEL. 24,000 applications for only about 4,000 places. To be admitted to Pitt these days, your SAT scores have to be astronomical. Now that's 1270 to 1440, of course, out of 1,600, an ACT of 28 to 32 out of 36, and 29,000 applicants for only 4,000 spaces. And Penn State is the worst of them all, 70,000 applicants for all campuses, and yet only 7,800 on main campus. And as you may or may not know, many students will put down an alternate campus on their Penn State application with really very little intention of going to that campus if they don't get into Maine. So for our wonderful state universities, and there they all are, do you know the difference between state and state-supported? Penn State, Pitt, and Temple are state supported, which means they act like a private university, but they get some state funding. These are the schools that are 100% dependent on the state. And as you remember, with all the budget battles that are going on in Harrisburg, the reason why until very recently they couldn't even set what their tuition was going to be is because the budget wasn't approved. So these are all the different campuses that are there, and you can see what their locations are in the state. And every year, it seems that most of their tuitions are going to go up 3.5% to 4%, which doesn't sound like a lot, except if you multiply that over 4 years, it means what you pay today is going to be 16% less than what you're going to be paying in your student's senior year. Across the board, here's what your average undergraduate costs are. Now, please remember, when we talk about most financial aid, we're talking about tuition and fees, room and board, the first two columns. But what is called the cost of attendance, which you'll see in a minute, is based on everything that you could possibly spend on an education. Books and supplies, getting the student back and forth to school, and personal expenses to make sure that they can go out for a pizza on Friday night. But almost $29,000. This is an average for state universities. If you want to go out of state, here we are in Pennsylvania, you want to go to the University of Maryland or even Delaware, that's the price. You're paying a premium just for the out-of-state, tuition. And then, of course, a four-year private college is now over $50,000, and you have several schools right now that are over $70,000 a year. So what we used to pay for 4 years of education could be 1 year of education today. Here are the most expensive public universities, and this was, I just redid the list because it used to be Penn State was like the worst, but I guess they're getting a little bit better because they're number 4 now. Yay. So you have William & Mary, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and even Pittsburgh are now above what they are. But I mean, you take a look at some of these numbers and you say to yourself, this is for a public school education, where 20 years ago, that would be what Penn costs. So, how much money in student aid is available? The good news is there is a lot, all right? There's billions of dollars. But take a look, in an inverted triangle, what's the #1 source of financial aid? Loans. Well, that's money you gotta pay back. We really don't want to do that as much as we would like to get grants and federal grants and tax benefits and state grants and federal work study, stuff that we don't have to pay back. So there is a lot of money, but unfortunately a lot of it is going to be based on your ability to borrow. Now, how many here are parents of seniors and juniors? Okay, sophomores, freshmen, cool, which is fine. All right, it's always great to plan whenever you get around to it, so people that are now planning for freshmen and sophomores, that's not unusual anymore. But the first thing for junior and senior families is you have to set up an FSA ID, which is your gateway to all the federal websites. And you go to this website here, studentaid.ed.gov, and you set up a username and a password. Now, I recommend that you set it up not only for your student, which is mandatory, but at least one parent in the household, and if there are 2 parents, you can do it for 2 parents as well. The only caveats they have is that you have to set up a FSA ID with everybody having a separate email address. That was not the case years ago. But now, if your student has an email address, that's the one you use to set up their FSA ID. If you have an email address, which I'm sure you do, that's the one you set up your FSA ID with. It only takes about 5 or 10 minutes. It's not rocket science, but it is a little pesky little website, so just be careful. And you're, by the way, in days that we're concerned about breaches and things like that, they've made this very, very secure.
That's for multiple students too?
Yes. In other words, if you have one student, one FSA ID for, let's say, a senior. Let's say you have a junior right behind them, that would mean another one for them. So everybody has to have their own. One of the terms that you'll hear thrown about is expected family contribution, EFC. If you don't learn anything else tonight, please learn this. 20 years ago, it was defined as what you can afford to send one child to college for 1 year. But because of those numbers that we just went through that made everybody's head spin, EFC is now designed and defined as what you can pay over time. In the old days, a couple of loans, a little work study, we're fine. We could get, through college. Now you have to pay for it like you pay for a house or a car. And that's just the dirty little detail of what it is. There's that cost of attendance that I was talking to you about. You have tuition, your living expenses, which is room and meal plan, books, and fees. Any of you have somebody in college? Well, wait until you see the bill, okay? Because when you see that bill, you're going to be amazed at the actual fees that you're going to find on there. And these are actual fees that I pulled from different universities. Student activity fee, I could live with that. Transportation fee, I guess that means taking the shuttle all over campus. Athletic fee, ID card fee, oh, the student success fee. I guess you didn't know they had one of those, but they do. Student excellence fee, ID card fee. They charge you twice sometimes, that's why I put it twice. Bicycle path fee, life safety fee, academic facility fee, the air that you breathe fee, clean water fee. I mean, name it, they got it. If you look at your bill, probably 10 to 12% of your actual costs for going to a university are fees.
Can you fight any of those?
No.
So like the spirit fee.
No, well,
Like-
yeah, okay. Here's the thing, like the student activity fee or the use of the gymnasium fee,
Right.
that's just to get you in the door. There's another fee if you want to use the equipment and things like, it's whatever they can do to nickel and dime you, which sounds awful, but it is. I mean, having a daughter who went to, university myself, and it was a state university in New York, very nice campus, everything, I couldn't believe the fees that were on there. And, she also pledged a sorority, so that wasn't included. That's a separate Greek fee. So there's, you name it, you got it. So they define need as the difference between what the school costs and what your expected family contribution is. Get that concept? All right? So schools will usually meet about 80 to 100% of that gap. There are some schools that are better, there are many that are worse. And the information on how much of a need they meet is on all the websites because, fortunately, because of the consumer things that they put together and all the different things and disclosures, you definitely want to take a look and see how much of a need they meet. The more expensive the school, fortunately, the more need they do meet, but that means they're more expensive. The public universities are not very good at meeting that total need. For example, Penn State. If we added in all of the stuff that I told you about, it's $36,000. If you take out the other things that I talked about and just looked at tuition and fees, room and board, it's about 31 or 32, okay? If your expected family contribution is $14,000, well, look at the difference in need. There's a $22,000 gap there. Penn State only meets 58% of that need, okay? You have to meet the other 42% yourself. Pittsburgh is no better at 54, IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, 63, and Temple is at 69. So they don't meet all of it. But a school like Swarthmore, which I'll show you in a minute, and some other schools like that, they do meet 100% of the need. So you ask yourself, all right, so what do they take into account when they're figuring out what my need is? Well, the federal methodology is using the FAFSA form, which is available next week, as a matter of fact, and that's filled out annually, and that's for all schools. Some schools, here in Pennsylvania, they also have what is called the state grant program, called FIA, and so there's a separate form you fill out for that to see if you are able to get a state grant fee. Institutional means that a school like Villanova, they may say, well, we have your FAFSA, and we have all the other stuff, but we have our own form. So would you mind putting in all the information you just put on the FAFSA on our form, just so we can double check? Okay, so you do that. Then they say, oh, by the way, we're one of 600 schools that uses a CSS Profile, which is a College Board monstrosity. Now, let me ask you a question before I tell you about the CSS. Right now, please just jot down on the back of your paper 400 questions about your financial condition. Go ahead. No, I guess not. But that's what the CSS Profile is asking, at least 400 questions, and some schools have their own supplemental questions on top of that. And it can get as ridiculous as, What kind of car do you drive? Okay? What church do you attend? Yeah. I mean, just so we can see if there are any scholarships available for you, mind you, but we're going to ask almost anything we can possibly think of to find out about your financial condition. So Villanova, by the way, is a CSS Profile school, so now you have FAFSA, you have their institutional form, and the CSS Profile. For them to let you know if you earn enough, you're not getting any money from them. So, exercise of futility? Yes. So October 1st, your forms become available. So the first thing you can do, and all schools will allow you, they have these net price calculators, you can figure out your expected family contribution. Then you calculate how much each of those schools cost. And then you analyze, did I save? Do I have a 529 plan? Am I taking a second mortgage on the house? Don't laugh, people do that. Am I tapping my retirement? Don't laugh, people do that. Not saying it's right or wrong, but they do it. So after that, once you figure out all those parameters, now you can figure out, okay, let me fill out the financial aid forms so I can laugh and cry at the same time. And then once they see that, then maybe hopefully we can evaluate and see if I can get more money by either crying on the phone or writing them a nice letter explaining that they didn't give me enough. This is brand new, and it started last year. In the old days, you used to fill out the FAFSA with your last year's tax return, and then you'd have to update it with this year's tax return. They decided they didn't want to wait. So you're always going to be a year behind in terms of your taxes. This way, you know your 2016s are done already, since we're almost done with 2017. And so 2016 is what they're going to be using for this year. So if you have a junior, it'll be 2017's taxes that'll be used. So you're always going to be a year behind filling each of these FAFSAs, okay? Ivy League schools, if you have a student who's smart enough to go to one of these, good, because they're the ones that provide 100% of the need, and if you do have need, they will provide everything that you require to pay for college. So if your adjusted gross income, which is what AGI stands for, are at those amounts, 60,000, 100,000, 150,000, even at Yale 200,000, they're going to reduce the amount that you have to pay. And so, for example, if your expected family contribution is $20,000 and you have no equity in your home, in other words, you have mortgages that equal how much the home is worth, and you have very little in retirement, well, a $65,000, $68,000 school will cost you $20,000, and they will give you $48,000 worth of aid. Most of it, almost all of it, as a matter of fact, you will not have to pay back. So sometimes families say, I'd love my child to go to an Ivy League school, I think they could get in, but they're so expensive, I don't know if I can afford it. They try to make it as affordable as possible. As an example, University of Pennsylvania, you see your family income over there. So somebody who has $100,000 of income will get, and 99% of the applicants who have that type of income got full financial aid. Their average aid package was 42, which meant that Penn would cost you about $22,000 out of pocket. So that's less than what Penn State would cost. Less than Temple, exactly the same thing. Okay? So there is hope at some of these schools that have very large endowments, but your student has to kind of be smart also. So if we take a look at somebody who has an expected family contribution of $18,500, in other words, that's what the federal government thinks you can afford for one child. And here are two schools. You have Swarthmore, and that's a almost $66,000 school, and your expected family contribution is $18,500. You subtract it and you see how much that gap is. Remember, we talked about that, it's $47,000. They need 100% of that. So Swarthmore should cost you $18,500, all things being equal. You take a look at LaSalle, great school, not as expensive, but they don't give 100% of the need. So they make you, or want you to pay the 27% that they don't cover. You with me? And 27% is an extra $6,900. So even though LaSalle is less expensive, you could wind up paying more, and in a school it's more expensive. Make sense? So the financial aid process begins with that FAFSA that I was telling you. completed by all families applying for financial aid. And on one of the pages, they have you list the schools that the student is applying to. Rule of thumb, I have many thumbs. Rule of thumb will be to put a home state, in other words, a Pennsylvania state school first. Whether it's public or private doesn't matter. But the reason being is that will trigger that FIA grant application that you may or may not be considered for. But if you don't put a state school first, they're assuming that you don't want the free money if you were able to get it. So you want to put a state school first. And that'll help you to get any of the student loans from the federal government. If you don't file the FAFSA, they will not give you those loans. So how complicated is it? It's about 95 questions, about 10 pages. And when Uncle Sam and Aunt Iris want your money, they certainly make it a lot easier. Okay, if you file a 1048, it's only 48 lines, and even the 1040 is 75 lines. And what that FAFSA generates is something called Student Aid Report, which is just the FAFSA in a more easy to read form. And it'll tell you what your expected family contribution is, number one, and number two, whether or not you have a federal grant eligibility, which is called the Pell Grant. And just again, a second thumb is that you usually only can have an income of around $30,000 to $35,000 to get a Pell Grant from the federal government. For the FIA, by the way, it's around $67,000, $68,000 of income, bottom line of your 1040. So people ask, well, what are some of these mistakes that people always make on these forms? Well, I know you know your name, but your name on your social security card has got to match, okay, what you're putting on the FAFSA. Otherwise, it kicks it out. So in other words, it's as sensitive as if your last name is O'Reilly and on your social security card there's no apostrophe, but yet you put an apostrophe in on the FAFSA, kicks it out, doesn't recognize it. So that's how sensitive it can be. So if you're not sure because you lost or misplaced or haven't seen your social security card in years, like me, you can go onto the SSA website, and when you put in your information, set up an account, it'll show you exactly what your social security card says. And if you need to make any changes, you can do that. Many families put off doing these financial aid forms until they say, okay, Johnny got accepted too, therefore now I'll do the financial aid forms. Don't do that, because it's time sensitive. Just as there are application deadlines to get into the school, there are financial aid deadlines for applying for financial aid. And if you miss them, even by one day, all bets are off. They say, we'll be happy to review it next year, but for this year, we're not obligated to give you a dime. So that's why, even if you're not sure where Johnny and Janie are going to go, file the FAFSA, put in as many schools as you want. If the student winds up not applying, the schools don't hear from the student, they just trash all that stuff. So your stuff is not hanging out there waiting for somebody to grab it. So just want to let you know. Also put your marital status as it stands at the time that you file. In Pennsylvania, separation is not considered a legal status, but on the federal government forms, it is. So if you are separated but not divorced, you're going to be using the FAFSA with only the custodial parent's information. Okay, so if there's a split and mom is the custodial parent, we're only using mom's information for the FAFSA. Okay, and again, in divorce, if you're remarried, you're married again, that's marriage, and you include everybody's income. Never include the retirement assets. A lot of people, you'll see, it says on the FAFSA, how much are your investments? You're only talking about non-retirement investments. So if it's an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, a 457, anything like that, don't put it in. There's another form, the CSS Profile, that makes you put everything in, but for FAFSA, don't put stuff like that in. And speaking of the CSS Profile, there it is. 600 private schools use it, and here's the differences between the FAFSA and CSS. Notice FAFSA, household income only. For the CSS, they want the household income and the non-custodial parent. So if there was a separation or divorce, custodial parent, non-custodial parent remarries. Now that income and those assets are included as well for the CSS profile. So as I say, they get you coming and going. Non-qualified assets, yes and yes. Retirement assets for the FAFSA, no. CSS, yes. Your house on the FAFSA doesn't count. Don't put anything down about it. Whether you own it or anything, they don't want it. CSS profile, absolutely. Investment properties, in other words, you have a shore house or a mountain home or a second rental property or something like that, that counts on both of them. But the family business only counts on the CSS profile. And by the way, when you're filling out the form, they're asking you a question, does your business have more than 100 employees? If the answer is no, well, if the answer is yes, talk to me afterwards, I'd love to know what you do. But if the answer is no, then your business literally has zero valuation. No matter what your Schedule C or K1 or anything says about your profit and loss, okay? So don't make the distinction between, all right, I know it's not worth anything, but I did make a profit. That's two different things we're talking about.
What's the CSS? I've never heard of that one.
It's on College Board, it's through College Board,
Oh.
and it's you have to set up a username and password for that as well, and it's about 400, 600 questions about your financial condition. It includes everything that FAFSA doesn't. So I'm not saying don't apply the CSS profile tools, but just know that you're in for pack a lunch, a dinner, and a sleeping bag while you fill it out. The asset protection allowance is interesting because even though the federal government would love to have you give them all your information, you don't have to. So here's the deal. They will say, based on the age of the oldest parent in the house, you can kind of exclude a certain amount of money from financial aid consideration. So for example, if you're 44 years old and you're married, you can exclude up to $27,500 that's in your checking, your savings, your money market, things like that. It doesn't count. You'll report it, but it counts as a zero. If you're single, notice it's a lot less. If you're 54, 10 years older, you can exclude more. So there's a chart that you can kind of figure that out, but it's automatic when the FAFSA's calculated.
Mm-hmm.
It'll let you know what is and isn't included. All right, so age of the oldest parent, number of household members, 2 legs only. Okay, I have 3 cats, I can't count them. But, now, and this is now almost October, wow, the holidays are almost upon us. Now would be a good time to find a homeless person and bring them in, okay? And count them on your, income taxes, somebody who's living with you, and what you could do is, again, make a bigger deduction. So, funny as that may seem, what can I tell you? Haven't seen that done yet, but someday we will. Here's another thing. When we talk about the value of your home, this is interesting. How many of you have recently gone on Zillow or maybe consulted with somebody, a real estate broker, and said, what's the value? How much is my house worth? Well, the house is worth whatever somebody's going to buy it for, but if you take a look at Zillow and you put in your address, it's amazing, all these websites that give you exactly how much you can, charge if you were selling your house. Wonderful, okay? Well, please don't do that. Because the federal government has a way of doing it in a much more benign manner, shall I say. And you go to this website, www.finaid.org, and the only thing that calculator is going to ask you about, 2 questions. What year did you buy your house, and how much did you pay for it originally? Now, I'll give you the most extreme example. Somebody could have bought a piece of land for $12,000 and then built a $600,000 house on it. You paid $12,000 in 1985 for the land. That's what they're looking at. So in your home's case, we don't have people in the federal government knocking on your door saying, oh, your child's going to college next year? Let me evaluate your house for you. No. They use that calculation, which is usually a fair, below market value of your home. And that's what you should use, because if you overvalue your home, then the federal government or these schools think, well, you have all that equity in your home, you can borrow against it. So use what they're talking about. I'll give you an example in a minute. So again, over-evaluation can kill you when it comes to financial aid. So what do I mean? Well, here's a house that was bought in 1995 for $145,000. The family went on Zillow and they think it's worth $330,000, and they have two mortgage positions totaling $145,000. So just doing simple math, 145, okay, 330 is what they think it's worth. So 330 minus 145, according to what they think, they being the owners of the home, they think they have $185,000 worth of equity in the home. Who knows, okay? But if you use that Federal Housing Index multiplier on that finaid.org website, they value, they being now the federal government, values it at 227.6. It's a big difference. And if you do the math, which I won't bore you with, it means that your expected family contribution using their methodology, totally legal, totally the way to go, means you reduced your EFC by almost $13,000. That's a lot of money. So don't be wise in your own mind and say, I know what my home's worth, and you know what, across the street my neighbors are selling their home, but mine's nicer than theirs, so ours is gonna be worth more. Don't do that, okay? Now after they go after all of our assets, of course, what are they gonna do? They're gonna go after the kids, and they go after the kids with a vengeance. Far worse than we as parents, okay? And here's why. It includes all reportable income to the student. That's everything. Now, a student can earn up to $6,400 in a calendar year, counts as a zero. But if they're making a lot of money and they go over that amount, for every dollar that they go over, 50 cents is added to your expected family contribution. So right around now, begin looking at the pay stubs and seeing what their year-to-date earnings are, just to make sure you don't go over, or if you're close, you have some decisions to make. Remember that asset protection allowance I said that we as parents have based on our age? Nope, not for the kids. From $1, whatever's in their account, 20% of that is counted towards expected family contribution. So if a student has $2,000 in their account, that's $400 added to your expected family contribution. Now what can you do about that? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Here's what you can do. There's no look-back period for FAFSA, like there is for Medicare or Medicaid or things like that. So, before you file a FAFSA, if your parental allowance is well below whatever it is for your age, we'll use that example that we used, which was 30,000 or so. So let's say you only have 20,000 in your accounts, and $2,000 is in the student account. Move the student money into your account, and then file your FAFSA. Then after the FAFSA is accepted, you move it right back in. By the way, I've had the IRS sit in, and they know it's perfectly legal. Matter of fact, they came up to me after and said, yeah, you're absolutely right, and nothing we can do. So just saying that they have a large amount in their own accounts, move it. It counts far less against you than it does in leaving it in the student account, okay? So all of that is important. And by the way, if you have a 529 plan, that counts, even though it's for the benefit of the student, it counts as your asset, okay? So once you know that. So what do? Spend down the assets in the student's name first, because all those aid formulas count more heavily against the student than the parent. So 50% of student assets are included in EFC calculations, whereas only 10% of yours are. See that big difference? That's what you can do to kind of make this a little bit fairer in terms of playing field. What things can negatively affect your expected family contribution? Marrying. I'm not saying that's the worst thing in the world, but again, if you're a single parent and now you're getting married, now that new husband's income and assets count against your student. Purchasing investment real estate, inheritance, proceeds from the sale of an asset, overvaluating your house or your business, and having relatives gift money directly to the student. All of these things can negatively affect how much money that you can receive. So some people say, well, you know what? I'm young yet, I have a retirement account, and I'm going to use some of that money to pay for college. Not saying right or wrong, but look at this. IRA funds are exempt from early withdrawal penalties, but 401Ks are not, okay? Because now, if you use 401K money to pay for college, 10% premature distribution penalty, which is again on your tax form, and it counts as income tax, you have taxed on that, counts as ordinary income. So again, if you're using retirement, I would use that sort of as a last resort if nothing else works for you. You can take out loans to pay for college, but you can't take out loans to pay for your retirement. And that's a truism. So set a realistic goal, use a college cost calculator, because again, if you're borrowing money, here's the third thumb. Every dollar that you borrow, you're paying back $2. So if your student or you borrows $20,000, if you let it go to 10 years, you're paying back $40. So, worth it? I'm not here to say yes or no, I'm just giving you value for your dollar in terms of this is how it works. So, when you're talking about college with your students, make sure you have a realistic college list, that you take a look and say, that's a great list, Johnny, but none of them give any kind of financial aid, and we're not in a position to pay $50,000 a year. So if you kind of have that discussion before the student begins applying to these schools, and then they've done all that work, and you say, wait a second, I never looked at your list. Oh my God, none of these schools give money. You can't apply to any of these places. Now he's all ticked off because I did all that work, and I think I can get in because of my brains, but now you're telling me I can't, we can't afford it, especially if you have more than one child, okay? So,
How do you find out which schools give good aid, like you should, the Ivy League schools and those percentages?
How do you find them out?
find that?
Good question. There are many different sources. There are books out there that you can go to any Barnes and Noble, and they have all the, U.S. News and World Report.
Or library.
Barron's and, I'm sorry.
Or public library.
Or the public, thank you very much, Mark,
Thank you.
absolutely. So public library, they have all sorts of resources that can give you very good ideas about what the school costs, how much aid they usually give, and what your out-of-pocket's gonna be.
It's like
But-
Consumer Reports too. They put
Yes.
out a huge college article,
Correct.
actually a huge book a
Yep.
couple of months ago. It was very informative.
You have to do your homework on these
Yeah.
things, especially when the student is involved in applying for these schools. So if you have that discussion ahead of time, you set the limitations. It's the same thing if the school's, student says, in some cases, I want to get as far away from my parents as possible. Gee, I hope that isn't the case. But you're gonna limit, I don't want them in California, I don't want her in Montana, Hawaii would be a wonderful place to visit, but she's not going there for 4 years, okay? I mean, just to give you an example, my daughter wanted to apply to Pepperdine, Malibu Beach, and great school. I mean, really wonderful, pretty good with financial aid and everything else like that. But, mom said, there's no way she's going out there. And so I had to find a way of letting her down easy. So I told her that the work study out there was essentially they give you a fire helmet and a hose, and you make sure that the wildfires don't destroy your dorms every spring. So that kind of dissuaded her. But just ways of doing things, okay? Fourth thumb, I have so many thumbs. Use a third of your savings, a third of your current income, a third of loans. In other words, you can balance how you pay for an education. You shouldn't all, say, well, it's gonna cost me $50,000, I'll borrow it all. Well, 50,000 times 4 years is $200,000 worth of debt. And what I tell you, you're gonna be repaying $400,000. That's a beautiful home that you're not owning, okay? So again, be very careful when it comes to money, when it comes to types of things like that. Here are the 4 types of financial aid: grants, loans, scholarships, work study. The grant system, you fill out the FAFSA, and then the federal grants, if you qualify, are up to $5,920. CEOG is another supplemental grant that piggybacks on the Pell Grant. So in some cases, and I have clients that automatically, right off the bat because of their income, have almost $10,000 of free grant money every year. FIA, the Pennsylvania State Grant Program, has different amounts depending on the type of school the student is going to attend. Whether it's going to be a private school, a state related like a Penn State, or a community college. So you can't always figure out exactly how much you're going to have, but if you know the type of school, you can get a pretty good idea. Yes, sir.
Are those only for the state you live in?
Very good question. In 90% of the cases, the answer is yes. For FIA, there are about 4 or 5 states that kind of cross-reference these grants at a reduced level. So if you lived in Delaware, the same thing would be true. So this is the numbers for an in-state resident of this state of Pennsylvania. I do seminars in Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey. They're all different types of grant programs. So for Pennsylvania, if you live in the state, this is the one that you're going to be looking at. If you go to Delaware, some of this money may transfer over, but not all of it.
So what would the income limitations be on like a FIA grant?
FIA grant, $67,000 or less of your adjusted gross income. And the reason, by the way, they use the bottom of page 1 as your guideline for how much you're going to be paying for college, because everything that you possibly could use to make this nicer is on page 2. Okay, all your deductions, all the stuff that comes off, so that, oh yeah, I earned that, but by the time I get finished, I'm only paying tax on this. Well, they don't want that. They say, well, whatever your gross is, adjusted gross, there it is, that's what we're basing the number on. They're not dumb. They are pigs, though. All right, for loans, you file your FAFSA, and the student can automatically get a loan from the federal government. Now, years ago, it could have paid for the entire education. But my generation got wind that if we did not pay, not me personally, but if we did not pay our loans back, nothing happened to our credit. So everybody defaulted. And the federal government lost tens of millions of dollars. So they said, you know, once burnt, twice shy, so we're going to limit the amount that a student can borrow without anybody co-signing. And the limit is $5,500 for the freshman year, $6,500 for the sophomore, $75 and $75. And the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized, subsidized means that there is no interest rate, 0% while the student is in school. And because of the 2008 fiasco in the stock market, they added $2,000 a student can borrow on top of that to make it that $5,500 for year 1, but that is at an interest rate of 4.66. Okay? And it would have been there if I can move the screen down. So that's how that works. So those are the loans that are available. Now, here are some scary numbers. Not here to make you lose sleep, folks, but these are numbers that are very interesting. That is not a misprint again. 1.44 trillion with a T in student loan debt. And take a look at how much is in default, how much is past due. It's a lot of money, okay? Numbers are misleading though. Remember I told you that for undergraduate students, the max was 55, 65, 75, 75? Well, if a student goes to graduate school, interesting thing happens. Here's a student who has a 4-year degree. They go, Mom, Dad, I want to go to graduate school for my MBA, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a dentist, I want to be a lawyer. So here's what the federal government says, okay, fill out a FAFSA. But because you're an independent student, because you graduated from a 4-year program, you don't have to report your mom's and dad's income and assets anymore. So Johnny and Janie fill it out, they go, well, I don't have a job, so I have $100 in the bank, oh look, my EFC is 0. So you would think that somebody in the federal government would say, no income, no assets, how the hell are they going to pay this money back? But instead, here's what they do. They say, oh, Johnny, you want to go to the Wharton School of Economics for your MBA? How much is that? $60,000? Sign here. Done. And I guess they worry about Johnny and Janie paying it back after they have their MBA. That's why those numbers are the way they are. Okay? So just because a student can get that amount of money doesn't mean that there aren't other ways that they can reduce their debt. Okay? So it can be crushing, as you can tell. Here's the FX. It delays buying a home, delays getting married, delays having a family. You have to take a job instead of going for an MBA. You have to take a job outside of your field because you're not qualified for a job in your field. And you have to work more than one job just to pay off your student loans. Those are the percentages, okay? Most college graduates earning $40,000 annually rely on parental support to subsidize. Now, my kid doesn't, and I'm not bragging or anything, but it just happened that way. But for many parents, you know what it's like. If you have a student who's living in their own apartment and stuff like that, you know, look, every once in a while, my student, you know, my daughter will call me up and say, hey, Dad, I'm a little short. I said, kid, you were born that way. But in addition, I'll give you a couple of $100, but I'm not paying $1,000 a month because she wants to live on her own. I'm not paying for her car payment. These are all things that she's taking care of because she's employed. Fine, okay? You don't want this to happen. Kid comes home, all right? You've already made the bedroom into a man cave, all right? You've already done something else with that room. You weren't thinking that they were coming home again. And so there they are in the basement next to the washer and dryer on a couch because they don't have a job. Let's try to prevent that from happening, okay? National average graduate loan, when you graduate after 4 years, that's the amount. In Pennsylvania, the average is almost $35,000, and across the board, pretty close to that amount, just to give you an idea, okay? Fortunately, there are companies out there that are now helping students. In other words, they get them employed, and then they say, in addition to your salary and your benefits package and things like that, you stay with us for a couple of years, we're gonna start paying off your debt as a sort of a little bonus, a little perk. So Fidelity, Price Waterhouse, Cooper, there are many companies out there that are beginning to do that. So, hey, help's on the way and hope's on the way, so not terrible. Everybody wants scholarships, okay? There are many scholarship search engines out there. I will be sending you a whole bunch of them tomorrow as a thank you for attending. And colleges, upon acceptance, will give the student a scholarship based on their GPA, their SAT or ACT scores, or things like that. And they can be given for merit in academics, they can be given for athletics, and even for art and music, which requires usually a portfolio or an audition in order to get extra money. Some colleges, by the way, when they give you your initial financial aid package, and let's say it's the student's #1 choice, don't jump in and say, oh, great, we're in it, sign, go. No, play hard to get. Because many of these schools hold back a portion, and if your student has a little asterisk that says, we really want that student. It's been a month, we haven't heard from them. Guess we'll up the ante a little bit. Hey, we just found another $5,000 a year for you, for doing nothing except waiting to see what a better offer could be. So do that. Raise.me is a scholarship search engine which takes the students' extracurricular activities in high school and pays them a little amount of money. I'm not saying it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not sure exactly what the amounts are, but hey, every couple $100 could be a textbook, it could be a computer, it could be something that offsets the cost of college. So all of this is very, very important, and there are ways of discovering. So schools will give scholarships, but there are plenty of outside opportunities, and some of them are really unbelievable. If you go to some of the websites that are out there, there are some that have, like American Dairy Association, write a 300-word essay on the power of milk. You win $10,000. Okay, has nothing to do with what I want to be when I grow up, but hey, I drink milk, so okay. Okay. You know, that's what I'm saying. But some of these corporations have things like that. Don't go for the Burger Kings and the McDonald's. Those are millions of people apply, and there are only a couple of scholarships available. The best ones are right here locally. Okay? It's the Knights of Columbus, it's the Rotary Clubs, it's the service organizations, it's the groups that meet at the diner at Tuesdays at 6 a.m. You know the ones I'm talking about? They have the Kiwani signs as you enter town. You know, Joe's Diner, we meet there Tuesdays at 6 a.m. Those are the ones that have some money to give. So, not a bad idea to pursue those as well. Work study is a little job on campus. It'll show up on your financial aid package. It could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a year. It's 5 to 10 hours of work for the student on campus. My daughter worked in the library for 4 years on a work-study grant. As an asterisk, why did she get that? I'm divorced, so it was my ex's income, which was negligible, that got her all the money, okay? So what happened was, she got a job in the library. It was like $10 an hour, except during midterms and finals, when it was always open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So she volunteered for the graveyard shift, midnight to 8 a.m., $30 an hour. And slept probably for 5 out of the 8 hours. Because no one's using the desk. They just need the place to study. So, smart ways of doing it. However, it'll be on your financial aid. You get your bill. It's not there. Oh my God, what they do, take it away? No. If you think you're seeing one thin dime of that money, you're not. You know why? Because it's paid directly to the student. And the student can even set up the, automatic, debit or automatic payment into the account. So every 2 weeks, paycheck goes in. But this way, at least, when they call you up and say, I'm broke, no, you're not. You had a job. Where's that money in the bank that I never saw? Okay, so that's how it works. Students should should shoulder some of this financial burden. There's no doubt about it. Now, for example, let's say that they work in high school, senior year. They work 12 hours a week, make minimum wage, which, for argument's sake, is $8, $10 an hour, whatever it is. That's $2,000. All right. Well, they save 90% of that. Could pay for a lot of the books. Could pay for a laptop. Could pay for the spending money that they keep nagging you. All right. Nothing is free. Rewards come from hard work, job schedules. Schools like it. They say, hey, the student not only is a good student, but they can manage time. They have responsibility. They're doing a great job. They're earning money. Okay? So that's what you want to do is, students should always think that, you know what, I have some skin in the game. Now, those student loans that I talked about, yeah, they can have $27,000 when they graduate. But they can offset some of the money if they work or they do other things that could, create more of their sense of, I'm paying for some of my education. So, how are you gonna pay? Well, once you know what the federal and state aid is that you're getting, what your EFC is, how much the college is giving you in money, then you can decide how you're gonna pay it. Students should keep here's the fifth thumb. Students should keep their total college debt below their expected first year salary. As an example, a teacher earns, let's say, $40,000 a year with benefits first year. Well, that should be the total amount of debt that student has. An engineer could earn $80,000 or $90,000 a year. More expensive? Yes, but they maybe go to a more expensive school, so they have to borrow a little bit more, but because they earn more, they're gonna be able to pay that back similarly, okay? Stick to fixed rate, don't use variable rate, and don't try to avoid using retirement funds to pay for college. Anybody here pay cash for their house? Oh, yes, I heard that. In the 11 years I've been doing this, I had one person in an auditorium raise their hand. I think he was booed. I'm pretty sure, because everybody was so like, wow, I wish I was that guy, but I can't be that guy, so boo. Anyway, if you pay for college with cash, it doesn't make much sense, except that there are some people that have a philosophy, and it's fine. I don't want to be in debt. If I can afford it, I'll write a check, I'll pay cash, I'll do whatever, or I'll put it on a credit card and pay the balance off at the end of the month. You can do all those things. But if you didn't pay cash for your house, didn't pay cash for a car, paying cash for an education doesn't mean that your student gets to sit right in the front row, which they hate. Being a former college professor, I know. They don't want to sit there. They're not getting automatic A's because you pay cash for college. All you're doing is depleting an asset that took you many years to, save up. So there are several options. You can borrow from the federal government using the Parent Plus loan. This used to be a very good way, and it still is. But I don't like the fact that that interest rate went up. Interest rate last year was 6, now it's 7.21. It came down from 9 about 10 years ago. But if it starts heading back in that direction, I'm not a fan, okay? One of the good things is when one parent signs, if that parent, God forbid, doesn't make it, in other words, if they die, that loan is 100% forgiven by the federal government. So many times when a husband and wife get together, husband says, I'll sign for the loan, and then they sleep with one eye open for the next 6 months, wondering when the end will come. No collateral, okay? And there's even a grace period if you become unemployed. So not a bad thing, interest rate I'm not thrilled with. If you go through a bank, lenders are offering attractive features like multi-year approval. These loans for the federal government, they're approved every single year. You can't borrow for 4 years, nor should you. So lenders are saying, if we approve you, we're guaranteeing you're good for 4 years. Competitive lenders are vying for borrowers with good credit. If you have good credit, you're gonna have plenty of places out there, and you've seen them. SoFi, Navient, which is part of Sallie Mae. There are so many companies out there now vying for your dollars. It's a good market to be in. And again, their fixed interest rate, if your credit is good, is a couple of points lower than the plus loan. Just saying, okay? Ones that I like are Wells Fargo, Discover, Citizens. Sallie Mae's okay, but I think the best one that I've worked with is Wells Fargo and Discover, are the two that I like. The customer service is exemplary and very easy to fill out applications. You may also say, I don't want to borrow a loan, but I will take some equity against the house, because those interest rates could be way lower than even 5.4%. But some people say, you know what, I'm trying to pay off the house, I'm not trying to put myself more in debt to pay for college. So it's a yin and a yang, but that's a third methodology that you can pay for college by using equity in your home, if you so desire. Now, if your family income is $100,000 and you borrow $120,000, it's going to take you 12 extra years to pay that off. If you have $100,000 income but you only borrow $40,000, you might think it's 4 years, but when you have that small amount of money, and small is relative, 40,000 versus 100,000. But you look at 40,000, you can do things within your budget to maybe pay that off sooner. Very hard to pay an amount of money like that off sooner than 12 years for that example. EFC, very simple, got a couple more slides and we're done. Oldest parent is 48 years old, adjusted gross income you can see. They have parental assets that are non-qualified, which means not in retirement accounts, 160. Student has in their own account 24,000 in it, and the house was the one we showed you before, where they think it's worth 440,000. Okay? If you do nothing and use those numbers to fill out FAFSA, your expected family contribution is almost 28,000. But there's nothing you can do about your income if you're a W-2 employee, work for a company. But if you value your home the way you're supposed to, if you put some of the money into an annuity, which is counted as a retirement account and doesn't count towards financial aid. And the reason why we left 35,000 in there is, first of all, you don't want to put everything into retirement, you need some liquid assets. But remember that allowance that I talked to you about, parental allowance? That was the number in this case, it's below, and they spent the student asset. Well, all of a sudden, your EFC is more manageable, 16,000. So that's a difference over 4 years of about $44,000 worth of potential aid that you could get just by following directions that the federal government and yours truly is giving. So use your index values to value your home, your farm, your business. Modify your debt, make major purchases before you file your financial aid forms if you're doing that CSS profile. In other words, make yourself look poor, more debt, okay? So, again, you can reposition assets using the Parent Plus loan, using other loans, using a HELOC. There are many different ways to pay for college, and it's based on the way you want it to be. There's no right answer for it. So the best way to approach this is to be completely informed, which is why you guys are here today. Because pretty much college is your second biggest expense other than your house, or if you have a really nice car. So to maximize your student aid eligibility, file early and often, meet all your deadlines, be accurate and always file. These are things that you should always do. Even if you think there's no way I'm getting any financial aid, file, you never know. But if you too late find out, oh, I could have financial aid, oh, I missed the deadline. It doesn't take long to do these forms, and at least you have everything in place. Yes?
Kevin, how early is too early to file? I mean, is the form itself only valid for 1 year?
Correct. And October 1st, this seat for the seniors this year, that's when the FAFSA and CSS Profile become available.
You can't do it until then.
Correct. If you go on, many people say, hey, I just did it. I said, you filed last year's form. You know, a lot of good that'll do it.
So
Okay?
you said, they would look at the income from the year before, from the child's junior
2016,
year?
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
The child to see that.
Now, we have to stop the madness. You want to have the child go to Eastern to be a teacher or Westchester? Would you like to save $81,000 and both are just as good universities? If the student wants to be a business major, Georgetown, Temple, would you like to save $160,000 over 4 years? Both are equally as good, although Georgetown, I'm sure, has the name, okay? Engineering, Cornell versus Penn State, save $150,000 over 4 years. You gotta take a look at these numbers and say, when is enough enough? When is enough too much? And I'm saying in certain cases, that could be too much. Now, if these schools, Cornell, Georgetown, Eastern, give you phenomenal financial aid that make it closer to the numbers that I'm showing here, terrific. But if they're not coming close, and the student is, jumping up and down and throwing a hissy fit saying, I gotta go to. There's a very, very simple word that we've all used as parents. No. Okay? That's it. That's how it works. So you want to know your EFC, you want to plan, strategize before filing all these financial aid forms. So just about finished. Those blue cards that I asked you to fill out entitle you to a free complimentary consultation at my office in King of Prussia. That way you can bring in whatever you want to bring in and discuss, and it's never too early to talk about these things, and it is free. I'm not here to say, well, if you come in, I know you're going to sign up. I am a fee for service, but my fees are reasonable based on what you need, if you need it. Okay? So that's very important. And as an extra added attraction, you might have been wondering, why did I have Molly McGuire menus there? Both owners are my clients. Okay? And if you come in, just to entice you, if you come in for a free consultation, the first perfect pint is on me.
We need it after we see the bills.
That's exactly right. You are right. To show you the dreams come true, yes, that is my daughter. She's now 26, and here's what I wish for you. Remember I said about a benediction? Here's your benediction. My daughter graduated with very little debt from a state university in a field that she got a job almost immediately. Last week, she just got a 21% raise at her job. She owns, she is in her own apartment. She leases a car that's newer than mine. She has money in the bank, a 401k. And except for the occasional $100 or $200 that she may need, but she does work as a bartender in case she needs extra money, so it isn't like her hand's always out. What I wish for you is what she got. A job in her field, happiness, able to do what she's supposed to do, and proud parents, because we look upon that and say, I guess I didn't do too bad. Okay? So I thank you very much for your time and attention, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you have any questions that you don't want to share with the audience, I'll stay back, but go ahead.
I had some savings bonds.
Yes.
How's that?
Don't use them until the kid graduates.
Okay.
They're invisible until you cash them.
Yeah, that's why I was saying I didn't know when.
Wait until you see what the debt is, then cash them and pay. That way they don't count towards financial aid.
Does the EFC take into account multiple kids in college at the same time?
Very good question. I'm sorry I didn't bring that up, but I will now. The EFC is based on one student for 1 year. So if your EFC we showed was $18,500 for one student, when you have two in school for however number of years that is, it's divided in half. Which means when you have two in school, they're not saying, oh, you can afford double what you're supposed to pay. No, you afford half, which means more need-based financial aid for the years that they're in school. And I have families that have twins, I have families that have triplets, I have families that have seniors and then sophomores, I have families that have seniors, juniors, sophomores, 8th grade, and I have one family that had triplets and then 4 years later had twins. And
How many
the
points do you
punchline is, what does the father do for a living? He's an OBGYN. So
How many pints of beer did you buy in that?
What's that? That was a brewery.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have any questions, I'll stay behind. I want to thank Mark and the Phoenix School Library for hosting me. I'll probably be back if they will let me in the spring. I'll do an admission seminar for underclassmen, my sophomores and juniors, to give you more of an idea of getting into the schools that they want to get into. And I hope that you'll avail yourself of the free consultation, just so I can answer any questions I couldn't answer this evening.